The moment the patrol car turned onto that tree-lined street, red and blue lights flashing across the windows of those classic American houses, I stopped with my suitcase right at the entrance of my own home. The Virginia suburbs were supposed to be quiet in the late afternoon, with only the buzz of cicadas and the hiss of sprinklers in the background. But what I saw looked like a crime drama playing out in the middle of this peaceful neighborhood. On the porch stood Linda Harper. She was in her 50s, with dyed blonde hair tied up high, always carrying herself with way too much confidence. But now she was shaking, even though her voice came out sharp and loud. She was wearing a pearl-colored silk robe, a piece I recognized instantly from my wife's and my closet. Pointing straight at me, Linda screamed, her voice cutting through the whole block. "Officer, that's him. He broke into my house. Arrest him now." Right then, I caught the whispers of neighbors peeking from their windows, curious eyes fixed on us. The patrol car lights bounced off the glass, painting the house front in harsh streaks of red and blue. My grip tightened on the suitcase handle. I was drained after a 12-hour flight from Tokyo. Standing tall, I spoke slowly, clearly, making sure everyone could hear. "Linda, this is my house." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the low rumble of the police engine. My heart was pounding hard in my chest. I knew it wouldn't be long before the truth got twisted, and I, the rightful owner of this house, would have to fight right there on my own doorstep. You won't believe it, but this HOA president had been living in my home for 2 whole weeks. My name's Daniel Ross. I'm 42, and I work in cybersecurity. My job's nothing like most of my neighbors here. They're doctors, lawyers, small business owners. Me? I spend most of my time in international conference rooms, staring at screens packed with data, building security systems for global corporations. It pays well, sure, but it also means endless flights that wear me down to the bone. For years, I lived in cramped rental apartments in the middle of the city, where fire trucks, sirens, and neon lights bleeding through the windows were just part of every night. I thought that was my life. Work, travel, temporary living. But deep down, I always wanted something more. A place to really call home. This house, the glass and steel villa in the Virginia suburbs, isn't just property. It's the dream Emily and I built together. Back in our tiny Arlington apartment, we'd open my laptop and scroll through floor plans, playfully debating where the big windows should go, which direction the reading room should face to catch the morning sun. Emily loved natural light. I crave quiet. The home standing here today is the perfect mix of both. Emily passed 3 years ago, after a long illness. And since then, our dream has been unfinished. I was determined to carry it through, not just for myself, but to hold on to a piece of her. So when I first stepped inside with the new keys in my hand, I felt more than joy. It was like Emily was still here, in every doorway, every tile. The house sits in a wealthy, quiet neighborhood, with streets shaded by old oak trees and lawns trimmed like golf courses. It's the kind of place where people wave during morning walks, and kids ride their bikes around the cul-de-sac without a care in the world. For someone like me, always buried in a packed schedule, this felt like an oasis. A place I could finally breathe when I came back from work trips. Of course, I knew buying here meant dealing with an HOA, the Homeowners Association. On paper, they're supposed to keep the neighborhood tidy, safe, and uniform. But I've never been the type to sweat the small stuff. As long as my place is clean and the yard's taken care of, I'm good. I figured the HOA was just paperwork. Nothing to worry about. Turns out, I couldn't have been more wrong. Because running this HOA is Linda Harper, a woman whose very name makes the whole neighborhood groan. She lives in a smaller house right at the entrance, but acts like she's queen of the entire community. When I signed the contract, I had no idea the home I treasured most, the dream Emily and I shared, would become the battlefield where I'd have to fight against the boldest violation I'd ever face. I used to think moving here meant peace. But I was wrong. Dead wrong. In the first few weeks after I moved in, life was so peaceful I almost forgot I lived in an HOA community. Every morning I woke earlier than usual, made a cup of coffee with the new espresso machine, and took it out to the back porch to sip. Morning light poured through the big living room windows, casting a warm golden glow on the wood floor. I'd crack a window to let the cool air from the surrounding oak woods in. The backyard became my favorite place. I planted a Japanese maple in the corner, a small detail with big meaning. Emily used to say, One day we'll have a garden with bright red maples in the fall. The first time I dug the shovel into the earth, I whispered to myself that her wish was finally coming true. In the evenings, I liked walking the cul-de-sac. Neighbors sat on their porches, chatting over the smell of barbecue. Kids laughed as they rode their bikes in circles, the chains clicking cheerfully. A few folks who'd seen me around waved. In those moments, I thought maybe this was the American dream I'd pictured for so many years. Even work felt easier when I had a peaceful place to come back to. After long flights, I no longer felt lost in temporary apartments. Instead, I'd open the door to warm light reflecting off the glass walls and hear familiar jazz playing on the smart speakers. That's how I shook off the exhaustion. I'd sink into the armchair, look up at the high ceiling, and breathe out. Finally, I belonged somewhere. One late night, I sat in the reading room, the room Emily always dreamed of, and realized this house was like a promise that never faded. It reminded me that even though she was gone, our shared dreams still lived on, in the bricks, the glass, and the warmth that filled every corner. Those days made me believe life had finally given me a quiet place. A place with no fights, no noise, just the peace I'd been searching for all those years. But I didn't expect that peace was only on the surface. Underneath, a storm had been simmering, waiting to break. That peace lasted less than a week before I met Linda Harper. She showed up at my front door on a Saturday morning, clipboard in hand, looking more like an inspector than a neighbor. I remember the sky was clear that morning, sunlight streaming through the oak branches, and I was about to head out back to check the sprinkler system. But the pounding on my door made me stop. When I opened it, there she was. A woman around 55, blonde hair pulled tight into a high ponytail, heavy makeup that made her face look stiff. She wore a pastel floral dress that was a little too tight and carried a shiny leather purse polished to perfection. Her smile looked warm, but it was as cold as standing in front of a wax figure. "Welcome to Cypress Oaks," she said flatly, her eyes sweeping from my porch to the front lawn. "I'm Linda Harper, HOA president. I'm here to let you know your mailbox is completely out of compliance." I frowned. The mailbox? I had just picked a sleek black steel design, perfectly matching the modern glass and steel look of the house. "What's wrong with it?" I asked. Linda lifted a sheet from her clipboard and read it like a verdict. Rule 14, Section 3. Mailboxes must be colonial style, painted green, to maintain the community's uniform aesthetic. You can purchase the approved model at the designated store. Failure to replace it will result in a $50 fine per day. I froze, wondering if I'd heard right. In a neighborhood full of modern homes and mixed designs, I was being forced to replace mine with some outdated green colonial box. I tried to keep calm, but this mailbox is part of the home's approved design. It was installed legally with the house plans. Linda smirked, her smile never reaching those icy eyes. "Rules are rules, Mr. Ross. We maintain the aesthetic integrity of the entire community. I expect your cooperation." Then she scribbled on her clipboard, like nothing I said mattered. I wanted to argue, but when I glanced back at the unopened boxes piled in my living room, I sighed. I'd fought too many battles at work already. I didn't have the energy to start a war over a mailbox. In the end, I quietly bought the ugly green one and swapped it in. Only later did I realize that was my first mistake. Because, like a shark smelling blood, Linda had found my weakness. I was willing to give in. And from then on, the warning notes started showing up one after another. One morning, I was fined because my trash bin stayed out 45 minutes past collection. The next week, I got a notice that my Japanese maple wasn't on the approved plant list. Another time, just because an Amazon package sat on my porch for over 3 hours, she wrote, "Eyesore must be removed immediately to protect community appearance." Every time I opened the mailbox, there was another slip of paper crammed with words dripping in sarcasm. I started to feel like a prisoner in my own home, ruled by petty regulations. One afternoon, while I was crouched down, annoyed, measuring the height of my grass with a ruler just to make sure I wasn't breaking any rules, Arthur Miller, my next-door neighbor, leaned on the old wooden fence and chuckled. "Welcome to Linda's game." Arthur, a retired engineering professor with white hair and a kind smile, shook his head. "Don't let her drive you crazy. Linda's run this place like her own kingdom for over 10 years. I once saw her try to find a family because their grandkid's birthday party had too many balloons. I gave a weak laugh, but inside, a chill ran through me. I realized the peace at Cypress Oaks was only surface deep. Behind it was a small but relentless power structure, with Linda Harper holding the scales. Back then, I still thought I could endure it. But I had no idea everything was about to spiral into a nightmare I never saw coming. In early May, I flew to Tokyo for a big project. Before leaving, I did exactly what the HOA required. Sent an email to the board, letting them know I'd be gone for 4 weeks, from the 1st through the end of the month. I even switched my house to energy-saving mode and armed the security system. I'd built myself a network of sensors, cameras, and logs tracking every flicker of light and every change in temperature. The first week in Tokyo was a blur. Meetings stacked on meetings, tense presentations with corporate execs. By the time I got back to the hotel, I'd just crash. I barely had a second to think about home. But in the second week, something odd popped up. My phone sent an alert. The thermostat in the master bedroom had been manually changed from 65 to 72 degrees. I frowned, figured it was just a glitch. But 2 days later, the smart fridge recorded a gallon of milk, some yogurt cups, and what really stopped me cold, a cheap bottle of Chardonnay. I never drink cheap wine. That uneasy feeling crept into my bones. I logged into the system from my laptop. The records showed someone turned on the TV at night, logged into my streaming account, and spent 3 hours watching a reality show about rich housewives. My heart raced, my hand tight on the mouse. I switched over to the live camera feed, and what I saw left me stunned. On my leather sofa sat Linda Harper, wrapped in one of my cashmere throws, sipping wine from a crystal glass. Right next to her, her husband Mark had his feet propped up on my coffee table, flipping channels with the remote like this was their living room. They looked so relaxed. I felt like I was the intruder spying from outside. I slumped into the chair, my head spinning. This wasn't a break-in. This was an outright takeover. Linda hadn't just stopped by to check on things. She had moved in, treating my house like her private vacation rental. In that moment, a detail hit me, the HOA rule I'd fought against but lost. Every homeowner had to leave a spare key with the association for emergencies. Linda, as president, had the key. And now, while I was gone, she'd used it. I wanted to call the police right then, to shout that someone was trespassing in my home. But reason pulled me back. From half a world away, I'd just sound like a panicked voice on the phone. Linda could claim anything: a water leak, a fire alarm, a routine check. No, I needed more than outrage. I needed evidence no one could twist. When I shut the screen, rage burned hot inside me. But beneath that fire, the security expert in me was already calculating. I had the upper hand. My system didn't just protect the house. It documented everything. Linda thought she was enjoying a secret getaway. In reality, she'd just walked into a reality show with no audience, and I was the director. Sitting in that cramped Tokyo hotel room, I took a deep breath and steadied myself. I opened a new encrypted folder and typed the title, Operation Harper. Then I started saving every video, every log, neatly numbered and organized, ready for the day I came back. Linda thought she had a whole month to enjoy herself. But what she didn't know was that I'd be home sooner, and I'd see her little show play out with my own eyes. For the next week, I turned into a digital ghost drifting through my own house, but only on my laptop screen. Every night in Tokyo, after meetings, I'd pull up the cameras and watch. The more I watched, the hotter my blood got. I saw Linda comfortably eating dinner in my kitchen, opening a bottle of red I'd saved for special occasions. I saw Mark stretched out on the couch, snacking on stuff from the nearby grocery store, flipping channels on the 85-inch TV I'd just installed. But the thing that hit me hardest wasn't the wine or the TV. One evening, Linda opened the master bedroom door. She didn't hesitate. She walked straight to the closet I'd barely touched since Emily died. On camera, I watched her pull out a jade green silk scarf, the scarf Emily used to wear on chilly autumn afternoons in Washington, D.C. Linda draped the scarf over her shoulders, admired herself in the full-length mirror, then turned like she was trying on a fancy outfit. She even smiled with satisfaction and smoothed the soft edge of the fabric. In that moment, my heart felt ripped apart. My throat closed up and my hands shook so badly I had to set the laptop down. Tears I thought had dried up when I said goodbye to Emily flooded out. This house was the last bit of memory I was trying to hold for her. And now a brazen, arrogant woman was treating it like a stage to show off her shallow desires. I stopped seeing this as an HOA violation or a civil dispute. It was a deep, personal insult. Linda had crossed the line between things and memory, between a house and the soul of the person I loved. From that second on, I swore I wouldn't just get the house back. I was going to make her pay for every ounce of arrogance she'd shown. Pain turned into motive. Instead of calling the police right away, a quicker but risky choice, I took the harder road: gather proof. Each video file, each system log, every image of Linda in the kitchen or mark on the patio became a brick in an airtight case. Some nights I stayed up watching every camera, seeing them use my crystal glasses, enter my study, even invite another couple over to drink in the backyard. They'd raise a glass and laugh, and Linda would boast, "Being president of the HOA has its perks." Every word felt like a knife in my chest. But instead of letting anger take over, I held it back. I remembered what a colleague once said: emotions never win a day to war. Evidence is the weapon. So my personal pain turned into fuel. I wasn't just a homeowner who'd been violated anymore. I was a cybersecurity pro, and Linda had just walked into the net I'd woven. From the moment Linda put on Emily's scarf, I knew this wasn't private anymore. This was a fight for honor, and I wasn't going to lose. When the pain cooled into resolve, I started doing what I do best: building a case. To me, every data packet, every clip, wasn't just info. It was a brick for an impenetrable fortress. On my laptop in Tokyo, I opened a new folder called Operation Harper. Inside, I split it into sections: video, audio, logs, subjects. I downloaded hundreds of gigabytes from 16 security cameras. Linda and Mark eating at my kitchen table, sleeping in my bed, raiding the fridge, even strolling around the backyard like they were enjoying a luxury resort. Every file was numbered and time-stamped. But I didn't stop at video. The smart home logged every motion. Lights in the living room turning on at 10 p.m. How many times the master bathroom flushed in a day. I built an Excel sheet comparing power usage by room. The living room spiked. The guest room stayed at 0. They were clearly only using the best spots. I pulled data from the automatic coffee machine. Espresso beans dropping day by day, water usage spiking. I saved the playlists they played on the smart speakers. Soft rock from the 80s on repeat. So cheesy, even reading the logs made my skin crawl. Then the diamond moment in the data came. One night, Linda sat in my study. A camera with a mic already on recorded everything. Her voice was clear and smug on the phone. "Oh, March, it's fabulous. The owner's some tech nerd off in Asia. The least I can do is keep the place running. Gary's in heaven with that giant TV. We'll be out by the 31st. He'll never even know we were here." I hit pause and sat still. Her laugh, full of arrogance, echoed in my head. This wasn't just presence. It was a confession. Those words were the silver bullet. I clipped the audio, labeled it Exhibit A, backed it up to 3 different servers, and sent a copy to a spare phone. For me, data safety mattered more than gold. The next morning, I sent an encrypted, urgent email to David Kaplan, a lawyer I'd worked with on cyber cases. Subject line: urgent unlawful occupancy evidence. I attached a screenshot of Linda on my sofa and the short audio clip. David replied in under an hour, "Call me now." We spoke on a secure line. He was quiet for a few seconds, then let out a long whistle. "Daniel, in 20 years of practice, I've seen bold people, but this is classic arrogance. We can make this a test case to take her down." A plan took shape. David warned that if I returned on June 1st like I'd told the HOA, Linda could clean up and deny everything. But if I came back early, she'd be caught off guard. She'd panic, act on instinct, and the truth would be easier to show the police. We picked May 15th, long enough for Linda to get comfortable in her vacation, and early enough that she couldn't erase the traces. The rest of my days in Tokyo turned me into a mad coder. Days I presented to clients. Nights I edited, labeled, and sorted data in the hotel. I made a slide deck with images, timestamps, and Linda's words. I cut a 5-minute highlight reel from multiple days showing clearly this wasn't a check-in. It was extended illegal occupancy. When exhaustion hit, I pictured Linda with Emily's scarf. That hurt turned into fuel. Before my flight home, I and David traded one last email. He wrote, "Let her call the cops. Stay calm. Facts will win. She'll destroy herself with her arrogance." I closed the laptop and leaned back in the hotel chair. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady. I was ready. Linda thought she was enjoying a free vacation. What she didn't know was I'd set a tech trap, and I was waiting to close the curtain. That 12-hour flight from Tokyo to Virginia was probably the longest of my life. Not because of jet lag or exhaustion, but because my heart pounded with every passing hour. On the plane, I opened my laptop and scrolled again and again through the evidence, organized like a full prosecution file. The Operation Harper folder was packed with videos, audio, data logs, all waiting for the moment I'd step back into my own home. When I landed, I didn't call my usual limo service. Instead, I grabbed an old yellow cab and told the driver to stop 2 blocks from my house. I didn't want anyone spotting I was back. My suitcase rattled on the pavement. Birds chirped in the oak trees above. The spring sky was bright and clear. Everything looked peaceful, the exact opposite of the storm about to break. I walked slowly into the neighborhood, my eyes lingering on the small house by the gate Linda's place. Her silver Mercedes wasn't in the driveway. My chest tightened. She had to be in my house. When my villa came into view, I saw her right away. Linda was lounging on my front porch, wearing a silk kimono, and I recognized it instantly. It was Emily's. A wine glass in her hand, the afternoon sun lighting up her smug face. My blood boiled, but I remembered David's words, "Stay calm. Let her strike first." I pulled out my phone, hit record, then rolled my suitcase straight toward the house. At first, Linda didn't notice. When she finally looked up and saw me, her face shifted in an instant. Shock, panic, then pure rage. She shot to her feet, slammed the glass down, and shrieked, "Who are you? This is private property. Get out." I stopped at the steps, set my suitcase down, and answered evenly, "Hello, Linda. I'm Daniel Ross. And this is my house." Her face flushed red, eyes wide. For a moment I saw real fear. Then arrogance swallowed it whole. She whipped out her phone and dialed 911 right in front of me. "There's an intruder," she screamed, voice shaking but dramatic. "He's threatening me inside my own home. Send police right away. I'm afraid for my life." Her cries echoed through the quiet street. Neighbors peeked out their windows, watching. I stood still, silent, letting the camera capture every word. 10 minutes later, sirens tore through the air. 2 squad cars screeched up, red and blue lights flashing across the front of the house. A young officer, tense, and an older, seasoned sergeant stepped out. The sergeant introduced himself. "Sergeant Miller. What's going on here?" Linda rushed forward, pointing at me. "It's him. He broke into my house. He's dangerous. Arrest him." The young cop, Officer Reed, put his hand on his holster and ordered me to raise my hands. I did, speaking calmly. "Check my ID. I'm the owner of this house." Sergeant Miller studied me, then motioned for my license. I slowly pulled out my wallet and handed it over. He glanced at it, then looked back at the house. 1120 Cypress Lane. His experienced face shifted from doubt to sharp focus. "Ma'am, this ID matches the address," he told Linda. Linda's laugh cracked, her voice breaking. "He could be faking it. I'm the HOA president. I'm responsible for this house. You have to listen to me." I stepped up to the door, pressed my finger on the scanner. The lock beeped and clicked open. Proof no one could deny. The silence on the porch was heavy. Linda froze, her face pale. Then she tried one last desperate cry. This is a misunderstanding. I was just checking a plumbing issue." Right then, a black sedan pulled up. David Kaplan stepped out in a crisp suit, leather case in hand. He walked over, flashed his attorney badge to Sergeant Miller. "I'm Mr. Ross's lawyer. We have clear evidence of 2 weeks of unlawful occupancy." He opened his tablet and played the audio of Linda bragging on the phone. "We'll be out by the 31st. He'll never even know we were here." The words rang out, undeniable. Sergeant Miller's jaw tightened. He looked at Linda, then at Mark, who was peeking nervously from the doorway, sweat on his forehead. Mark stammered, "I told you, Linda, I didn't want any part of this. I said it was a bad idea." The moment hit like a bomb. Linda screamed denial, but it was useless. The cops had evidence, the lawyer had files, and the neighbors had seen it all with their own eyes. Sergeant Miller stepped forward, voice firm. "Linda Harper, you're under arrest for trespassing and unlawful occupancy." The click of handcuffs echoed like the toll of a bell, marking the end of her arrogant reign. And in that moment, as Linda was led away under the eyes of the whole neighborhood, I knew the game was over, but the fallout had only just begun. When the cuffs clicked shut on Linda's wrists, the whole street went silent. Only the wind through the oaks and a few satisfied whispers from the neighbors broke the stillness. The woman who had crowned herself queen of the HOA was being led away, her face flushed red with anger and shame. I stood there, suitcase still on the steps, taking a long breath. After weeks of watching from halfway around the world, I was finally seeing justice unfold at my own front door. Mark, Linda's husband, practically crumbled as the cops took her away. He stammered, voice trembling, "Daniel, I am sorry. I told her this was a terrible idea. I never wanted." Sergeant Miller held up a hand, jotting down his words, then reassured him, "We'll sort this out. But clearly, you got pulled in. The investigation will show the truth." And it did. Mark was cleared later. The police saw he cooperated and had no real part in it. But I knew the collapse of their marriage would be the heaviest sentence he'd face. In the days that followed, Cypress Oaks woke up like a community shaken from a long nightmare. Conversations spread everywhere from the tennis courts to the cafe by the gate. Everyone had their own Linda story, fined for planting the wrong flowers, for a mailbox that was too bright, for a dog barking more than 3 minutes. And now, they'd all seen the tyrant in handcuffs. One evening, I walked with Arthur Miller, the kind old professor. He chuckled as we strolled. "See, Daniel, justice sometimes comes late, but it comes." Linda thought HOA power was armor. Turns out, it was just a cheap mask. I nodded, feeling the silent agreement in every neighbor's eyes as we passed. They didn't just see me as the victim who'd been vindicated. They saw someone who finally stood up to the bully they'd feared for years. Legally, Linda's case turned into a textbook example. With the mountain of video, audio, and data I handed over, David Kaplan barely had to lift a finger. Faced with overwhelming proof, Linda's lawyer had no choice but to tell her to plead guilty. The verdict: 3 years probation, heavy fines, and full restitution for everything from wine and groceries to the last coffee bean. I counted every cent, filed it all with the court. The bitterest blow for Linda came when she and Mark had to sell their small house at the gate to cover the fines and legal bills. On moving day, I saw the U-Haul loaded with their belongings, Mark's head hanging low, Linda avoiding every glance. The glory of being HOA president was gone. She left as nothing more than a failure. But the fallout didn't stop with her. The HOA board imploded. At an emergency meeting, every member resigned after David warned I could file a class action suit for negligence and abuse of power. I didn't want money. I wanted change. At the next full community meeting, I showed some of the evidence: photos of Linda hosting a patio party in my backyard, the audio of her smug laugh saying, "He'll never know." Murmurs of outrage filled the room, followed by applause when I closed with, "No one here should ever hand over absolute power to walk into our homes. This isn't just my story. This is about all of our safety." Right then, the residents voted to abolish the rule requiring spare keys for the HOA. That was the most important legacy of it all, a community freed from fear. When elections came, many pushed me to take charge. But I refused. I didn't want power. I wanted peace. I nominated Arthur Miller instead. The crowd roared with approval, and he reluctantly accepted, smiling warmly. From that day, Cypress Oaks turned a new page. The HOA became a support system, not a weapon of control. Linda lost everything: her house, her reputation, her power. But for me, the real reward wasn't just winning. It was seeing a whole community reborn. A few weeks after it all ended, I stood in front of my house on a summer afternoon. On the fresh green lawn, the sleek black steel mailbox had been reinstalled, the very one I was once forced to replace. It wasn't just a mailbox anymore. It was a symbol. A statement that I had finally reclaimed the freedom inside my own home. That evening, I carried a bottle of scotch out to the patio. The same bottle Linda once poured for her guests like it was some kind of trophy. Now, I poured it into a crystal glass, sitting quietly as the sunset painted the garden red. My Japanese maple swayed gently in the breeze, its young green leaves promising a fiery fall. I took a sip and closed my eyes. For a brief moment, I could almost see Emily sitting beside me, her eyes glowing in the twilight. I knew if she were here, she'd smile with pride. The house we dreamed of was finally safe, and her memory untouched. Looking back, I realized something. Linda didn't lose because she was dumb. She lost because she was arrogant. Because she believed the tiny power of being an HOA president could cover up the truth. But evidence and patience stripped it all away. This story isn't just mine. It's proof of a bigger lesson. Bullies exist because we stay silent. They thrive when they think no one will push back. But the moment someone stands up with truth in their hands, the whole false empire crumbles like a sandcastle. And I learned one more thing. Sometimes the strongest weapon isn't rage exploding. It's persistence, data, and undeniable proof. With those, you don't have to shout. You just let the truth speak for itself. By the time I put out my cigar and stood up, the sky had turned deep purple, crickets chirping all around the yard. I took a deep breath, feeling peace settle in at last. And I knew Cypress Oaks would never be the same again. If you've ever lived in a community with absurd rules or had to deal with a difficult HOA president, share this story. Because sometimes, all we need is proof that truth will always outlast arrogance.